Good afternoon. In 1996, Václav Havel spoke at Trinity College in Dublin and presented a very optimistic viewpoint of the European Union. He said, "Europeans should give deeper thought to the historical significance of their magnificent unification effort, that they should look for the true and innermost reason behind it and for its broader mission, that they should reflect upon their relationship to the world as a whole, to its future, to nature, and to the great dangers looming over humankind today. Europe should realize that the European question is a human and global question as well. It is in the answer to this question that Europe should look for its soul." Recently, however, Václav Klaus, current Czech president and noted Eurosceptic, has contradicted these views. He said, "A unique coalition of European political elites, Brussels bureaucrats, and certain cosmopolitan intellectual groups are accelerating the European integration train without regard for the true interests of the European citizen. It seems that some of the optimism and enthusiasm once shown for the European Union has faded." Here with us today on EuroWatch to examine this issue is Dr. Benjamin Weinberg, who will be speaking about the current economic situation of the European Union, analyst Stephen Feit, who will be speaking about the current challenges faced by the European Union, journalist Brittany Frankel, who will discuss the challenges faced by the Czech Republic in adopting the euro, and Dr. Modupe Akinuanu, who will suggest possible solutions to these problems. Ben, I'd like to start with you. What is the current economic situation of the European Union, and what factors must we look at to arrive at that conclusion?
To answer that question, I'm sorry? Is this on? To answer that question, it's necessary to analyze what the Lisbon European Commission calls structural indicators. The Lisbon Agenda was agreed upon in 2000 and then revised again in 2005 to give a general outline of the economic goals of the European Union. The following structural indicators are official statistics used to evaluate how far the EU has come in progressing towards those goals. They are general economic background, employment, innovation and research, environment, economic reform, and social cohesion. GDP per capita is commonly used as a general economic indicator of the strength of a nation. If we're going solely by that, then the EU is still far behind the United States and slightly behind Japan. At the beginning of the decade, there was a marked decrease in the world economy, and as you can see, the GDP per capita started to go down across the board. However, since then, both Japan and the United States have recovered, while the EU is expected to decline into 2007. GDP growth rate reflects a similar position. In 2000, as the world economy waned, the EU surpassed the United States' GDP growth rate for the first time. However, since then it has fallen back to previous levels and is currently behind both the EU and Japan, both the United States and Japan,
How has the EU progressed in terms of economic reform?
Business investment in the EU has been declining over the past few years, although it showed a slight resurgence in 2004. Comparative price levels give a better idea of the success of the common market policy in the European Union. As you can see, the comparative price levels of the EU have remained more stable, whereas the United States and Japan have fluctuated over time.
What are employment trends like in the European Union when compared to other economic giants like Japan and the US?
Unemployment is a major issue for the European Union. As you can see, the long-term unemployment rate in the European Union is much higher than that of Japan or the United States. Social cohesion is another major concern. The at-risk of poverty rate, while fluctuating in the past years, recently increased in 2004.
Are there other major issues concerning the advancement of the Lisbon Agenda?
In innovation and research, the EU is also falling short of the United States and Japan. The percentage of GDP spent on R&D research, as you can see, has been much less than that of the United States or Japan, and at current rates cannot catch up. The energy consumption is another major environmental and economic issue. As you can see, the European Union currently resides somewhere between the United States and Japan in the economic energy intensity. They must continue to decrease their energy usage if they expect to continue with this trend. Obviously, there are many major challenges faced by the EU in adapting to the Lisbon Agenda.
And here to tell us some more about those challenges is CNN analyst Stephen Feit. Take it away, Stephen.
Thank you. There are four major economic challenges facing the EU right now: slow growth, aging population, unemployment, and oil and energy dependency. The GDP growth in the EU lags behind Japan and the United States and is expected to for a few years to come. Furthermore, the baby boomers born just after World War II are aging. This means that more people are retired, more people are collecting pensions, fewer people are employed, fewer people are making money, the candle's burning from both ends. It's not a good thing. However, unemployment may be a bigger problem in the EU as it is extremely high at a rate of 9.4%. This is a serious figure when compared to the US, Japan, or China, even Russia, which has a very high unemployment rate as well. Finally, Europe imports approximately half of the energy that it consumes, giving it very little leverage in the international oil and energy market. Any international crisis of significant proportion can and will ripple through the European economy in the form of high energy prices and low oil availability. Furthermore, as Ben stated earlier, GDP per capita is a good way of measuring the strength of a given economy. And although the EU is ahead of Russia and China, they still lag somewhat behind Japan and the United States.
The European Union recently signed the Kyoto Protocol. How are the conditions of the protocol affecting the economies of the countries within the European Union?
The Kyoto Protocol is by far the largest of Europe's tangible challenges, and adherence to the Kyoto Protocol will only be detrimental to the economies within the EU. Spain, England, and Germany are all set up to lose approximately 5% of their gross domestic product because of Kyoto, and the Netherlands are projected to lose just under 4% of their GDP because of the Kyoto Protocol. Furthermore, millions of jobs are going to be lost because of the drastic downsizing of petroleum plants and oil refineries in an economy where unemployment is already a major issue. However, some of the less developed countries may have the chance they need to catch up to the more developed countries that will be hit hard by the Kyoto Protocol. As is clear, the more developed countries in the EU15 and in Japan, or just Japan, are much above the Kyoto Protocol standards they need to adhere to, and it will take some time for them to lower to that level. Europe faces a host of challenges, and only time will tell if they're able to meet them all.
Can you tell us something about the comparison between the EU and the US?
Yeah. To finish my point, though, I'll say that if you compare the economy of the EU with that of the US, you'll realize that the US is decades ahead of the EU in terms of income, employment, and productivity per capita at the current growth rates. And it will take over a century for the EU to reach American levels of research and development investment.
Brittany, I'd like to turn to you now. What obstacles does the Czech Republic face in the road to adopting the euro, and where did these originate?
Well, the challenges that the Czech Republic faces in adopting the euro stem from many aspects of their society. As you already know, the Czech Republic has already met the Copenhagen criteria and is now a new member state in the EU. The economic criteria laid out in the Maastricht Treaty need to be met before euro adoption, and Czechs have actually already met all but two of them. For example, the inflation rate must be no more than 1.5% above the three best performing members of the EU. If you look at reports from the Czech Statistical Office, you'll notice that the inflation rate was almost non-existent in 2003, and although it did increase slightly in 2004, the government brought it back under control this past year. In addition, the government debt is also within the parameters of the adoption requirements. However, one of the problems that still remains is getting the public deficit within 3% of the gross domestic product, the GDP. In 2003, the public deficit reached its peak at approximately 12% of the GDP, but it has quickly declined. By 2005, the deficit went down to approximately